The first mistake Instructor Varkaldras made was touching the human before taking attendance. I know that sounds dramatic, like the kind of line old veterans whisper in station bars after too much recycled oxygen. But I was there, third row, left side, seat 14, watching a 7-foot combat instructor turn one quiet earth boy into the most important lesson our academy ever recorded. The human's name was Noah Carter, and at first glance, he looked painfully ordinary. 5 feet 9 inches, maybe 160 pounds, brown hair cut short, academy jacket zipped halfway like he had forgotten whether he was cold or bored. No armor plates, no defensive spines, no throat frill, no claws worth mentioning. Just 2 hands, 2 eyes, and that strange human habit of standing still like the universe was not constantly trying to kill him. We had been told he came from Earth, a classified death world with storms big enough to swallow cities, predators with forward-facing eyes, and gravity heavy enough to make half the class request medical exemption. But looking at him, I assumed the records were exaggerated. Everyone did. Humans always looked like mistakes that had somehow passed inspection. Instructor Dras agreed. He entered training room C12 at exactly 0800, boots striking the black impact floor with the confidence of a creature who had never been challenged by anything smaller than himself. His species, the Varkathi, were built like walking punishment. For shoulders, thick gray skin, eyes angled downward in permanent contempt. He had taught close contact defense for 22 cycles, and he reminded us of that every chance he got, usually right before humiliating someone in front of the class. That morning, the lesson was reflex control. Simple concept. Survive the unexpected. Respond without panic. Do not freeze. Dras paced the room, scanning us one by one, until his eyes stopped on Noah. The human was standing at the end of the line, calm, quiet, hands relaxed at his sides. Not nervous, not eager, just present. That seemed to offend the instructor more than fear would have. Carter, Dras said, his voice rolling through the room like a closing blast. Door. Step forward. Noah stepped forward. No hesitation. No drama. Just 2 clean steps onto the center mat. Dras circled him once, looking almost disappointed. This is what the council sends us now, he said, loud enough for all 31 students to hear. A soft little death world child who cannot even hold a proper guard. A few students clicked, hissed, or chirped in amusement. I did too. I will admit that. I thought the human looked out of place, like someone had accidentally enrolled a civilian in a predator handling course. Dras stopped in front of him. Raise your hands. Noah did. Too slowly, according to the instructor. Dras leaned closer. On my world, slow students learn through correction. Then he struck Noah across the face before anyone had even finished laughing. The sound was small. That was the terrifying part. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just a sharp little crack that cut the room in half. The laughter died instantly. Noah's head turned a few inches. His feet did not move. His knees did not bend. He did not cry out, stumble back, or make the frightened little sound everyone expected from a fragile species. He simply stood there, one red mark rising on his cheek, eyes lowered for half a second, as if he were checking a note only he could read. Dras smiled. Again, he said, guard faster. And that was when I noticed the first thing that made my stomach go cold. Noah Carter was not shaking. His breathing had not changed. His pulse marker on the wall display stayed flat, steady, almost bored. Then the human slowly turned his face back toward the instructor, blinked once, and asked in a voice so polite it made the whole room feel smaller. Was that part of the lesson, sir? For 3 full seconds, nobody in training room C12 breathed loudly enough for the audio sensors to register it. That should not have been possible. 31 students from 16 species, half of them with respiratory systems that sounded like damaged air filters, and the room went so quiet I could hear the soft hum of the gravity plates under the floor. Everyone was waiting for the human to do what weak creatures did after public correction. Step back. Lower his eyes. Apologize. Maybe request medical permission to sit down. Noah Carter did none of those things. He stood in the center of the mat with one side of his face marked red, his academy jacket still half zipped, his hands still loose, his expression still calm in a way that made no cultural sense. Instructor Dras stared at him like the training equipment had just spoken back. Repeat that, Dras said. His voice had lost a little of its theater. Not much. Just enough for someone paying attention to notice. I was paying attention now. Noah looked up at him. Not quickly, not defiantly, just steadily. I asked if that was part of the lesson, sir. A few students shifted in their places. The Kareth twins lowered their head crests. Juno Rel, a silver-skinned exchange student from Pellara, stopped smiling so hard her cheek vents sealed shut. No one wanted to laugh anymore, because the human had not sounded angry. Angry would have been understandable. Angry would have meant Drass had control of the room. Noah sounded like he was filling out a safety report. That was worse. Drass took one step closer. You are in my class, Carter. In this room, I decide what is instruction. Understood, Noah said. Then I need to know the rules. That sentence moved through the room like a cold draft. Rules. Humans loved rules, we had been told. They wrote them, argued over them, broke them, renamed them, and then pretended they had invented civilization. But the way Noah said the word did not sound academic. It sounded practical, like he was checking the edge of a bridge before deciding whether to cross it. Drass gave a low, humorless sound. The rule is simple. When I tell you to raise your guard, you raise it fast enough to survive. No, sir, Noah said. I mean the other rule. Drass froze. So did I. What other rule? Noah's eyes flicked once to the wall display. The biometric scanner still showed his heart rate in green. Normal range. Not elevated. Not suppressed by medication. Just normal. Mine was not. My pulse had climbed 17%, and I had not even been touched. The rule about instructors using force on students before a drill begins, Noah said. At my school. Back home. That would change the situation. Someone behind me whispered a prayer phrase from a moon religion I did not recognize. Drass heard it. His face hardened. He did not like losing the room, and he was losing it one silent student at a time. Your school back home was on a primitive rock, he said. This is the Veyrath Interstellar Combat Academy. Noah nodded once. Yes, sir. You will adapt. Yes, sir. You will obey. During instruction, yes, sir. There it was again. That careful little boundary. During instruction, I did not understand why those two words made my throat go dry, but they did. Drass understood even less. To him, the human was still small, still soft, still something that could be pushed into shape with humiliation and volume. He turned toward the class, spreading both upper arms as if presenting evidence. Observe the problem with Deathworld psychology. They mistake restraint for permission. They mistake questions for courage. They mistake one lucky survival environment for discipline. He turned back to Noah. Show the class your guard. Noah raised his hands again. Clean position. Not flashy. Elbows tucked. Weight balanced. Feet shoulder-width apart on the black mat. It looked simple enough that several students snorted under their breath. Then the motion sensors painted his stance on the display, and every snort died. The Academy system outlined his center of gravity in blue, then adjusted again, as if it could not decide where he was weakest. A small warning icon appeared beside his name. Manual review recommended. Drass saw it and dismissed the alert with a sharp tap of his wrist console. Faulty calibration, he said. Noah said nothing. That was the second thing that scared me. He did not defend himself. He did not explain Earth gravity. He did not brag about Deathworld training. He simply waited, calm and polite, while the room slowly realized the boy who should have fallen had not even stepped back. We should have known better than to judge a species by how breakable it looked. That was the first lesson Noah Carter taught us, though none of us understood it yet. To us, humans were a biological joke with surprisingly good paperwork. They arrived at the academy wearing soft fabric instead of armor, carrying little plastic water bottles, asking where the bathrooms were, and saying thank you to vending machines when the machines worked correctly. Their bones were internal, which seemed like a design flaw. Their skin bruised, their teeth were small, their hands had only 5 fingers each, and their eyes watered when the air filtration system got too dry. The Academy medical staff had an entire advisory packet titled Human Comfort Requirements, and we passed it around the dorms like comedy material. Keep room temperature within a narrow range. Provide chairs with lower back support. Do not expose humans to certain airborne pollens. Allow 8 hours of sleep when possible. 8 hours. My species slept 3 hours every 2 rotations and considered anything more a sign of organ failure. So when Noah first arrived 3 weeks earlier, we placed him at the bottom of the invisible ranking system every school creates no matter how civilized it claims to be. He did not challenge anyone. He did not posture in the cafeteria. He did not join the strength demonstrations in the lower gym, where the heavy gravity students competed by lifting armored cargo crates and pretending it was casual. He just watched. That was what made him easy to dismiss. Watching looks a lot like weakness when you are young and stupid. I remember the first lunch period he attended. He sat alone with a tray of Academy protein strips, inspected them like they had personally offended him, then pulled a small packet of red sauce from his jacket and poured it over everything. A Gorvian cadet warned him that the sauce registered as a mild chemical irritant. Noah smiled and said humans put it on eggs. We laughed for 10 minutes. Later, I learned eggs were unborn animal cells that humans cooked and ate for breakfast. That should have been the first warning. The second warning came during environmental conditioning. The room temperature dropped to 42 degrees Fahrenheit for a cold endurance drill, and half the class began requesting heat bands. Noah only zipped his jacket and asked whether the drill had started yet. The instructor marked it as species variation. We marked it as luck. The third warning came when the gravity plates briefly malfunctioned during hallway transfer and spiked to 1.3 Earth gravity. Most cadets stumbled. One fell into a wall. Noah shifted his backpack higher on one shoulder and kept walking. Again, we explained it away. Deathworld adaptation, sure, but not combatability. Endurance, maybe, but not danger. We told ourselves humans were sturdy in the same way storage containers were sturdy. Useful, not threatening. That morning in training room C-12, standing behind Noah while instructor Drast dismissed the scanner warning, I began remembering all those little moments and feeling them rearrange themselves into a shape I did not like. The quiet lunches, the calm eyes, the way he always stood near exits without seeming to choose them, the way his hands never stayed trapped in his pockets, the way he noticed every loud student, every loose floor panel, every camera blind spot, every instructor mood shift. We thought he was passive because he was silent. We thought he was harmless because he was polite. We thought he was slow because he never moved first. Then Noah lowered his guard by half an inch, just enough for instructor Drast to notice, and the entire room leaned forward like prey hearing a branch snap in the dark. Instructor Drast saw that tiny half-inch drop in Noah Carter's guard and smiled like the universe had handed him permission. That was the problem with proud teachers. They did not notice warnings when the warnings were polite. Drast turned away from Noah and faced us, making sure every student could see the human standing alone on the center mat. Class, he said, observe the failure pattern. The wall lights dimmed, the training grid brightened beneath Noah's feet, and a blue outline of his body appeared on the display above the mat. Height, 5 feet 9 inches. Weight, 162 pounds. Species, human. Origin, Earth. Threat assessment, pending manual review. Drast tapped the screen before anyone could stare at that last line for too long. Deathworld background creates confidence, he continued, pacing in a slow circle. Confidence creates delay. Delay creates defeat. Carter is not afraid because Carter does not yet understand the difference between surviving an environment and surviving a trained opponent. A few students nodded because that sounded intelligent, and we were young enough to confuse volume with truth. Noah did not nod. He did not object either. He simply stood inside the glowing grid, hands raised, eyes forward, breathing steady. That bothered Drast more than open disrespect would have. He wanted fear, or anger, or embarrassment, something he could name, something he could use. Instead, Noah gave him attention, and somehow attention felt sharper. Drast gestured toward the rest of us. Each of you will face surprise pressure this term. A sudden command, a sudden obstacle, a sudden threat simulation. You will learn to respond instantly because hesitation is the most common cause of failure in close contact encounters. He paused beside Noah's left shoulder. Our human guest hesitated when instructed. Therefore, he becomes the demonstration. The word guest landed badly. Noah had earned his place at the academy like everyone else. Entrance exams, medical screening, council clearance, 3 weeks of isolation adaptation. But Drast said guest because guest meant temporary. Guest meant tolerated. Guest meant not really one of us. I remember Juno Rel looking at the floor when he said it. I remember the Kareth twins going very still. Nobody defended Noah, of course. That is another thing schools teach without putting it in the curriculum. When authority chooses a target, the room learns silence first. Drast raised his wrist console and selected a training mode. The floor projected 3 red lanes around Noah, each one marking an angle of approach. Carter, you will defend only. No counters. No stepping outside the grid. No verbal commentary. No improvisation. Noah's eyes moved to the lanes, then to Drass. Are those the full rules, sir? A thin ripple of discomfort moved through the class. There was that question again. Not refusal. Not fear. Rules. Drass leaned in just enough to make the size difference obvious. He was nearly a foot and a half taller, broad enough to block half the display, armored in his own reputation. You seem very concerned with rules. Yes, sir, Noah said. Rules keep training from becoming something else. That should have stopped the lesson. That should have made one of the assistant instructors step forward, clear their throat, and reset the room before pride took the controls. But Instructor Drass had built a career on never backing down in front of students. He laughed once, short and cold. On Earth, perhaps. Here, rules are what stronger minds create for weaker bodies to follow. Noah absorbed the insult without blinking. The scanner absorbed something else. His shoulder alignment changed by 2 degrees. His weight settled evenly across both feet. His fingers opened, then relaxed. To anyone else, it looked like nothing. To the motion sensors, it looked like preparation. A yellow icon appeared beside his name. Drass ignored it again. Begin demonstration, he said. The room gave the soft confirmation tone. The red lanes brightened. Every student leaned forward, expecting to watch the human fail a basic defensive drill. I leaned forward too. Then Noah Carter quietly asked, if the rules change, am I allowed to protect myself? And for the first time that morning, Instructor Drass had no immediate answer. The question hung above the center mat longer than any alarm I had ever heard. If the rules change, am I allowed to protect myself? Noah Carter asked it softly, respectfully, like he was asking permission to leave class early, and somehow that made it worse. Instructor Drass narrowed all 4 of his eyes. Around me, students shifted in place, suddenly aware of the exits, the cameras, the assistant instructor booth, the little red safety strips built into the floor that no one had ever cared about before. We were supposed to be learning reflex control, but the human had turned the lesson into something much cleaner and much more dangerous. Consent. Boundaries. Authority. Words that sounded harmless until a Deathworlder said them in a combat room with a fresh mark on his face and a heart rate that still refused to climb. Drass finally recovered his voice. You are allowed to follow instructions, he said. Noah nodded once. That was not my question, sir. A quiet sound moved through the class. Not laughter, not panic, something trapped between both. Drass stepped closer, and the red training lanes flickered beneath his feet as the system tried to decide whether he was instructor, obstacle, or active threat. You think this is clever? He asked. No, sir. You think your little Earth customs matter here? No, sir. Then why do you keep asking? Noah looked directly at him then. And even from the 3rd row, I felt the temperature of the room change. Not literally. The climate control stayed at 72 degrees Fahrenheit. The air remained sterile and recycled. But every living thing in that room felt the old animal part of its brain lift its head and listen. Because back home, Noah said, when someone stronger hits someone smaller and calls it teaching, we stop calling it teaching. No one moved. Even the wall display seemed to pause, as if the computer needed an extra moment to process a sentence that simple. Drass stared at him, and I could see the instructor choosing the wrong interpretation. He did not hear warning. He heard insult. He did not see restraint. He saw defiance. Pride is slow that way. It walks into open doors and calls them traps afterward. You are not back home, Drass said. No, sir, Noah answered. That is why I asked first. That sentence should be preserved in the Academy Museum under reinforced glass. Not because it was loud. It was not. Not because it was brave in the usual dramatic way. It was not that either. It was procedural. Terribly, perfectly procedural. Noah was not trying to win an argument. He was documenting a line before someone else crossed it. I finally noticed his hands again. They were not fists. They were open. Fingers relaxed. Palms angled slightly inward. It looked almost lazy, until the motion scanner began mapping potential movement paths and failed to settle on one. Blue prediction lines flashed across the display, then vanished, then returned in 6 different angles. The system could read muscle tension, weight distribution, eye focus, breathing pattern, even tiny. Pressure changes in the soles of a student's shoes. It had predicted the movement of species with 4 legs, 6 arms, wings, tails, spring joints, magnetic feet, and 1 exchange cadet who moved by controlled rolling. It could not decide what Noah Carter was about to do because Noah Carter had not decided yet. That realization made my throat dry. The human was not preparing a single response. He was waiting to choose from several. Drass saw the display flicker and slapped the alert off his console. "Enough," he said. "You will demonstrate obedience now." Noah's expression did not change, but his eyes moved for one brief instant to the instructor's raised hand, then to the distance between them, then back to Drass's face. 3 measurements. Less than a second. Maybe half a second. Maybe less. I only know this because the Academy replayed it later frame by frame and still argued about when the human had started winning. Drass took another step into the grid. The floor safety strip turned yellow. Noah spoke one last time, so calmly that half the class leaned in just to hear him. "For the record, sir, I am still choosing not to hurt you." The floor strip turned from yellow to amber, and every safety lens in training room C-12 adjusted toward the center mat. That was the system trying to help us. We ignored it. Instructor Drass ignored it harder. He rolled his upper shoulders, a motion his species used before formal challenge, and the classroom seemed to shrink around him. "You are choosing nothing," he said. "You are a student. You are here because the council wants to see whether Deathworld instincts can be civilized." Noah Carter kept his hands open. "Yes, sir. You will stop speaking. Yes, sir. You will stop questioning." Noah paused for the smallest part of a second. During instruction, "Yes, sir." It was not disrespectful. That was what made Drass furious. If Noah had shouted, Drass could have punished shouting. If Noah had stepped forward, Drass could have punished aggression. But Noah kept giving him obedience with a boundary inside it, and the boundary was driving the instructor out of his own lesson. Drass turned to the observation booth. "Disable. Verbal scoring." The assistant instructor inside the glass enclosure hesitated. Her name was Marin Soul, a retired fleet defense officer with enough scars across her facial plates to make even senior cadets behave. She looked from Drass to Noah, then down at her console. "Instructor, the room is already in active evaluation. Disabling a scoring layer requires an administrative reason." Drass did not look at her. Reason: student disruption. Marin's fingers hovered above the panel, but she did not press confirm. That hesitation mattered. We all felt it. Authority was no longer moving as one clean machine. Something had entered the gears, and that something was a calm human boy asking simple questions. Noah noticed Marin's hesitation. Of course he did. His eyes did not move much, but I swear he tracked every reflection in that room. He knew where the booth was. He knew where the door was. He knew where Drass stood, how far his feet were apart, which shoulder carried more weight, and how quickly the instructor's breathing had changed. I did not understand human fighting, but I understood predators, and predators did not always crouch. Sometimes they just became very, very still. Drass stepped around him, forcing Noah to turn within the grid. "Class, you are witnessing contamination of discipline by emotion. The human wants to make this about fairness because he cannot make it about skill." Noah turned with him. Smooth. Quiet. No wasted motion. The scanner briefly flashed another warning, then replaced it with 3 words none of us had seen before. Pattern not cataloged. Juno Rel made a tiny sound beside me. The Kareth twins stopped breathing through their outer vents. Even the heavy gravity students in the back lowered their arms from their confident folded positions. Drass saw our attention drifting to the display, and his jaw tightened. Eyes on the demonstration, he snapped. Then he moved faster. Not a full attack, not by Academy terminology, but too sudden for correction and too personal for teaching. He stepped inside the red lane, raising one heavy arm toward Noah's upper chest, the kind of dominance gesture instructors used when they wanted a student to yield before contact. The room alarm gave one soft chirp. Not enough to stop him, just enough to become evidence later. Noah did not retreat. He did not raise his voice. He did not even look surprised. He simply shifted his left foot half an inch, and that tiny motion changed everything. The grid under him recalculated. The blue outline on the display snapped from student profile to unknown response profile. Drass was already committed, carried forward by pride, reputation, and the terrible belief that a quiet boy from Earth would keep accepting whatever the room decided to call a lesson. Noah exhaled once. Low, controlled, almost bored. Then, in the last clear moment before the academy stopped pretending this was a drill, he said, I understand. Noah Carter moved so little at first that half the room missed it. That is the part the Academy Review Board argued about for 6 hours afterward. They slowed the recording to 1/4 speed, then 1/10, then frame by frame. And still the first visible action was not a punch, not a shove, not some wild Deathworld explosion of rage. It was a choice. His left foot settled. His shoulders softened. His right hand rose along the inside line of Instructor Drass's arm, not meeting force with force, but redirecting it as if the instructor had handed him a training strap instead of a threat. Drass had committed all his weight forward, expecting Noah to fold, flinch, or freeze. Instead, the human stepped closer. That was impossible to our instincts. Small things moved away from large things. Prey moved away from predators. Students moved away from instructors who had already decided pride mattered more than rules. Noah moved in. His hand touched Drass's wrist. His other hand guided the elbow. There was no dramatic sound, no roar, no victory shout, nothing fit for a combat mural. Just a clean turn of the hips, a short shift of balance, and the sudden, humiliating discovery that the largest creature on the mat no longer controlled where his own body was going. Drass tried to pull back. He could not. Not because Noah looked stronger. He did not. Not because he looked angry. He still did not. He looked focused, almost sad. Like a student correcting a dangerous mistake before someone got hurt worse. The instructor's boots slid across the grid in a smooth half circle. The red lanes vanished. The floor system flashed white, then amber, then emergency blue. Training mode suspended. Contact classification pending. Medical standby requested. Those words appeared above us while Noah kept moving with the calm precision of someone who had practiced restraint more often than attack. Drass dropped to one knee because the position gave him no better option. His upper arm was held away from Noah, his wrist angled safely but completely controlled, his breathing loud enough for the audio sensors to pick up from the ceiling. I expected Noah to finish it. Everyone expected that, because every species in that room understood dominance as escalation. If you gained the advantage, you pressed it. If your opponent fell, you made sure the lesson stayed remembered. But humans, we learned, were stranger than that. Noah stopped the instant Drass stopped advancing. Not 1 inch farther. Not one unnecessary motion. He held the instructor there, contained but not crushed, embarrassed but not ruined, and looked toward the observation booth. Instructor Soul, he said, voice steady. Please confirm the drill has ended. Marin Soul did not answer right away. She was staring at the screen, and for the first time since I had known her, the old fleet officer looked uncertain. Then her hand came down on the console. Drill ended, she said. All students remained still. No one needed to be told twice. 31 cadets stood frozen while the quiet boy from Earth released one hand, stepped back exactly 3 feet, and raised both palms where everyone could see them. Drass stayed on one knee for a moment longer, not because Noah held him there, but because his own pride had not caught up with reality. The wall display finally completed its analysis and replaced Noah's student profile with a warning that made every throat in the room tighten. Close contact response exceeds Academy catalog. Manual threat review mandatory. Noah glanced at it once, then looked back at Drass. I did not want to do that, sir, he said. But you changed the rules. The first sound after Noah Carter stepped back was not applause, not panic, and not Instructor Drass shouting for discipline. It was the Academy computer clearing its digital throat. That is the only way I can describe it. A soft, polite chime, followed by a voice so calm it made the situation feel even stranger. Training classification updated. Student Carter, Noah. Previous status, low contact exchange participant. Revised status, restricted close contact responder. Instructor supervision level increased. The words appeared above the mat in bright white letters, and every student in training room C-12 stared at them like they had just accused the sun of being cold. Restricted close contact responder was not a student label. That was the tag used for veteran security personnel, anti-boarding specialists, and species with natural defensive reactions too fast for standard classroom drills. Noah looked at the display, then looked away, as if the system had announced the weather. Instructor Drass rose slowly, one arm held close, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and public humiliation. He was not badly hurt, but he was no longer pretending the situation had gone according to plan, and somehow that was worse for him. The room knew. The cameras knew. The floor knew. The computer had placed its official stamp on a truth none of us wanted to understand. The human had not attacked. The human had stopped an instructor from continuing. That distinction mattered to the system, and it mattered to Noah. Drass opened his mouth, but Instructor Marin's soul cut him off from the booth. Do not continue, Varkle. She did not call him Instructor Drass. She used his given name. In our academy, that was not casual. That was a warning between equals. Drass turned toward the glass. This is my class. And now it is under safety review, Marin said. Her voice stayed flat, but the booth lights shifted from blue to red around her. All further contact is suspended. A murmur moved through the students. Suspended contact meant the system believed another exchange could become unsafe. Not for Noah. For everyone around Noah. That was the part that made my hands go cold. The academy did not think the human needed protection anymore. It thought the room did. Noah lowered his palms only after Marin gave a small nod. Then he stepped outside the grid and returned to the end of the line as if he had just completed a normal exercise. Nobody moved aside for him at first because nobody believed he was actually coming back to stand with us. Then he did, and the line opened like a door sensing fire. I was closest. He stopped beside me, quiet, respectful, still with that red mark on his cheek, still breathing like nothing important had happened. I wanted to say something clever. I wanted to ask how he had done it, or why he had waited, or whether all humans moved like that. Instead, I heard myself say, "Are you okay?" Noah glanced at me, and for the first time that morning, he almost smiled. "Yes," he said. He gave me time. I did not understand. Time for what? Noah looked back toward the center mat, where Instructor Drass stood beneath the glowing warning screen, suddenly smaller than he had been 10 minutes before. Time to choose the gentle option, Noah said. That answer traveled through me worse than fear. Gentle option. The academy computer had just rewritten his file. The instructor had just lost control of his own classroom, and the human believed that was restraint. On the wall, the final review line appeared beneath Noah's name. Earth Combat Response, controlled. Lethality estimate, withheld pending council authorization. Withheld. Not low. Not moderate. Not high. Withheld, because the system either did not know or did not want to say. Around me, 31 students learned the same lesson at the same time. Noah Carter had never been the weakest student in the room. He had been the only one treating the room as fragile. By the end of that class, nobody cared about the lesson plan anymore. The official schedule still said reflex control, response timing, defensive posture, and instructor-led evaluation, but those words belonged to the old room. The room we had entered before Noah Carter quietly taught us that restraint could be more frightening than strength. Instructor Marin's soul dismissed us one row at a time, and no one complained. Not the Kareth twins, who usually argued with every order. Not Juno Rel, who had a talent for turning silence into commentary. Not even the heavy gravity students in the back, the ones who had spent 3 weeks treating Noah like a soft exchange project the council wanted us to tolerate. We filed past him carefully, leaving more space than necessary. Noah noticed. Of course he noticed. He just did not make it worse by mentioning it. That was another human thing I began to understand later. They could see fear and choose not to feed it. When my row reached the door, I looked back. Noah was still standing near the end of the line, hands at his sides, waiting for permission to leave like any other student. Instructor Drass stood near the center mat, surrounded by red review lights, speaking in a low voice to Marin's soul. His pride looked heavier than his body. Marin did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Every camera in the room had recorded the sequence. Every scanner had recorded the warnings. Every student had heard the question Noah asked before the situation changed. That mattered. In the academy, power could bend rules, but records made bending them expensive. 2 hours later, the training schedule changed across the entire campus. Physical correction was removed from all first-year demonstrations. Surprise contact required spoken confirmation unless the student had agreed to advanced simulation. Human students were quietly moved into a new classification category that no one wanted to explain in public. The label was simple, almost boring. Earthborn restraint trained. That was Academy language for do not mistake calm for permission. Instructor Drass returned 3 days later with a formal reprimand attached to his file and a new teaching assistant assigned to every class he led. He never touched another student without confirmation. He never called Noah a guest again. The strangest part was Noah did not celebrate. He did not brag in the cafeteria. He did not challenge the strongest cadets, did not demand an apology, did not turn the story into a legend for himself. He showed up to class the next morning with the same half-zipped jacket, the same quiet eyes, and a paper cup of coffee from the human vending kiosk that tasted, according to 3 brave volunteers, like roasted engine smoke. He sat through xenobiology. He took notes. He thanked the door when it opened automatically. And somehow that made the whole thing worse, because it proved the power had not been a mood. It had been standard equipment. A week later, I finally asked him why he waited so long before responding. We were in the corridor outside C-12, now marked with a new safety plaque, and Noah looked at the plaque for a moment before answering. Back home, he said, teachers do not hit kids. Predators do that. I asked him what humans did with predators. He looked at me, not coldly, not cruelly, just honestly. We teach them distance first. That was when I understood the real lesson. Earth had not made humans loud. It had not made them reckless. It had made them careful, because anything strong enough to survive there had to learn the difference between danger and discipline. We thought Noah Carter was harmless because he was polite. We thought he was weak because he asked for rules. We thought he was afraid because he gave everyone a chance to stop. We were wrong. Humans were not fragile creatures pretending to be civilized. They were dangerous creatures who had chosen civilization on purpose, and every rule they asked for was not a shield for themselves. It was a warning for everyone else.